In today's show, NBA free agency has started. Fred VanVleet, he went to Houston. Kyle Kuzma went back to Washington. Jerami Grant signed a contract for the GDP of a small nation. We're going to talk about everything that's happened so far on day one. Mick Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com. Promo code is Locked On. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. NBA free agency has started, so we're going to talk about that. It is currently 11:21 p.m. Eastern Time, Friday the 30th of June. So any deals that happen after that time, I'm sorry. The last move that has happened that I'm recording on here, well, I'm going to record tomorrow for everything else that happens. The last move that has happened is Monte Morris going to the Detroit Pistons. So that's the last move. So we'll get to it. Let's talk about everything that went down. Big money, confusion reigns, as always. Warning.
Let's get it on, Gilly.
All right. Let's look at what happened. New faces in new places. Let's go through the players that changed teams in free agency. And we'll start with the one that's going to have probably the biggest impact. And that's Fred VanVleet, multi-time All-Star, heading to the Houston Rockets. 3 years, $130 million. First of all, shout out to Freddles. That is an exorbitantly large deal. He's an undrafted player getting $43 million a year. Kudos. What a hard worker. What a legend. Been a really good fantasy player the last couple of years as well. He should continue to be a pretty strong fantasy player for the next 2 years. The Rockets roster, though, I don't understand what's going to happen. Their starting point guard was actually pretty good last season. Yeah, good enough. Big improvements. Kevin Porter Jr. Big improvements. They drafted a point guard at pick number 4 in Amen Thompson.
I think he's talking to you.
So what the hell happens now? They're in a real roster crunch scenario, and they haven't finished with free agency. Are they going to sign Brook Lopez? I don't know. So at the moment, we'll say that Jalen Green is probably going to start, and you'd have to say that Alperen Şengün is going to start at this point. Then there's Jabari Smith, who you'd guess would start, and Fred VanVleet is going to start. So it leaves one starting position for Kevin Porter, or Amen Thompson, or last year's incumbent small forward, KJ Martin, who might not be back, probably won't be. Tari Eason. How do they work it all out? Cam Whitmore, he's not going to start. So what do? This obviously, even if Kevin Porter does start at the 3, it negatively impacts his value, Fred VanVleet arriving. It really does put somewhat of a clamp on Amen Thompson early on. Still doesn't change anything about my Amen Thompson dynasty valuation. You pick Amen Thompson at pick number 4 with the hope that he becomes your best player. I think he's got bigger upside than Jalen Green, personally. That's what you hope. But there's squishiness going on. Amen, I don't think is going to be draftable for fantasy this season. For standard leagues, we'll see, because I just don't know what they're going to do. And then more moves could clear stuff up with Porter moving on or whatever they're doing. But it obviously hamstrings Tari Eason as well in terms of what his role is. And then further things could be complicated with other guys they bring in. A real confusing situation that will have to play out in the next few weeks. Gabe Vincent goes to the Lakers, 3 years, $33 million. That's very cheap for Gabe Vincent. That's very cheap. I guess he wanted to play with the Lakers. because he could have gone somewhere else for a lot more money than that. We don't know about D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves. They haven't been signed yet. I almost guarantee that Reeves will be back for the Lakers, and Russell they think could be back. We know that Dennis Schroeder won't be back. So Vincent might be a starter. They also drafted Jalen Hood-Schifino. He's just not going to play minutes at all, really, I'd guess, on this team early on. Vincent, even if he does start, it'd be relatively limited minutes and absolutely limited ball handling opportunities, and he's just not going to be a standard league player. He's a solid enough guy. I love the signing for the Lakers in terms of the value. 3 years, $33 million is unbelievably cheap, and how good of a player he is. Bringing good depth who can start, come off the bench. Is he a better player than D'Angelo Russell? At times. He might be probably a better playoff player than D'Angelo Russell. Is he a better player than Dennis Schroeder? I believe so. So it's great for the Lakers, but for us trying to figure it out for fantasy, I don't think this is going to make him a good option. The Shark, Bruce Brown.
Baby shark,
2 years, $45 million with a team option. That is big. That is huge for Bruce. Congratulations to him for getting that sort of a deal. I don't know whether the Pacers will pick up that team option next year, but we will see. Now, they're in a little bit of an interesting situation as well. They drafted Jarris Walker to play the four. Miles Turner's at the 5. Halliburton's at the 1. Then there's Mathurin. Then there's Hield. Then there's Nembhard. And now there's Brown. Will Brown, at $22.5 million a year, be a sixth man? Or is he just going to slot in and start next to Hield? Or is Hield going to come off the bench so Mathurin starts? I don't know. This obviously has an impact on one of those guys. It might be on both of those players, but we know Mathurin struggled significantly in fantasy last season, and Hield was pretty good, but that is a weird sort of situation. There's also an unfounded rumor at this point that Obi Toppin is being traded to the Pacers, but I don't know about that being true. It might be true by the time you listen to this. So Brown probably is a later round fantasy player, but someone is going to not be useful out of Mathurin, Hield, and Brown. And obviously Nembhard is going to get squished way down the pecking order, you would think here. So I don't think they're going to start Nembhard like they did last year and bring Brown off the bench. What it does in Denver, and they made some very questionable moves today, what it does for Denver, though, is it opens up a huge rotation spot. I would guess that Christian Brown takes on some extra minutes, as well as one of the blokes that they inexplicably re-signed using their mid-level exception in Reggie Jackson. Not that he's going to be fantasy relevant, but the way their rotation worked, where they basically had 6 starters, where Brown would play 27 minutes a night off the bench, that's probably not going to happen again for Denver. Even if Christian Brown could slide into some of those minutes, he can't really handle the backup point guard role the same way that Bruce Brown could. And then there's the addition of like a Julian Strawther and where he fits into that mix as well. Not that Jalen Pickett's going to be a rotation guy immediately, I don't think. And then, as I said, Dennis Schroeder somehow, for some reason, heads to the Toronto Raptors to replace Fred VanVleet. And you know that I've been very critical of Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster for years. And people still just will keep telling me trust in Bobby and Masai. You got to stop. Like, every move they make is bad. That's a generalization that's going a little bit over the top. But this isn't good. What are they building? Now, I do like this in terms of, in a vacuum, the value they got for re-signing Jakob Poeltl. We'll talk about that later. But where is this team going? I thought, okay, are they going to start Scotty Barnes full-time at point guard? I don't like that at all. And now you bring Dennis Schroeder in, who did improve his defense a lot last season, but he cannot shoot. So you lose VanVleet, a guy that actually can shoot, to bring in Dennis Schroeder to run point. I guess he's going to start, and I don't think he's going to be a must-draft fantasy guy, maybe a later-round player, but he could play 33 minutes a night and average 17 points on 41% shooting with 5 assists. He could. Maybe that is useful. And then the talk is, and again, this hasn't been finalized, that they're finalizing a lucrative extension for Gary Trent after just drafting Grady Dick. Why? Where are you going with this team? I know Raptors fans will cry about this, or maybe they'll agree, but this team, there's nothing happening here. Which direction are you even going? You could have traded Kyle Lowry, you didn't. You could have traded Fred VanVleet, you didn't. You could have traded Gary Trent, or he picked up his player option. What is he providing? You could have sold Anunoby for multiple first-round picks. Are you still going to do that? Why did you give a first to get Jakob Poeltl? Why did you give a first to bring Thad Young in? What are any of these moves that this team makes? Drafting Scotty Barnes turned out really good. But I think they also overvalue Scotty Barnes now in terms of what he is as a player. But that's probably the only thing I think you can point to as being a good move for this team so far, or in recent years. Just shithouse. Really bad. But Dennis Schroeder is there, and he's probably going to be their starting point guard, I'm guessing. Far out, man. And they still have no depth at point guard anyway. Who's their backup? Malachi Flynn? Again? Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. It's not individual rosters with salary caps where you're going up against thousands of people in a large field tournament. None of that. It's individual player projections. Points, threes, rebounds, steals, assists, whatever it is. You look at it and you go, bang, I think more or I think less. Choose it. You do that for whatever sport it is you're looking for. You do between 2 to 6 of those individual player projections into a lineup, and you can win up to 25 times your entry fee back. It's so easy. You can do this in under 60 seconds. It's available in over 30 US states. It's available in the majority of Canadian provinces and territories as well. And there's lots of sports. We do baseball at the moment. You can do MMA, you can do PGA, you can do NASCAR, you can do cricket, you can do WNBA. And then when NFL is in season, college basketball, college football, the NBA, all that goes as well. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Okay, let's look at some more new faces in new places. Joe Harris, Smokin' Joe, was traded to the Pistons into some of their cap space along with 2 future seconds. Harris is pretty cooked as a starting level player. He can still shoot. He's not going to start on this team, I would guess. Again, they can make some other moves. But this is a team, again, the Pistons, where there's a lot of trust in Troy. You shouldn't. He's bad. This is not a terrible move. Like, getting 2 seconds to take on Joe Harris is not bad, but they do it every year. We'll push the cap space. Watch how much cap space we'll have. I heard this last season when they took on Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks. Look at our cap space for next offseason. And now you just push it again. There's nothing wrong with get these future assets in, but at some point, are you going to get better or are you just going to keep pushing for cap space? And where does Joe Harris even fit on this team? Does he even play? There's Cade, obviously. There's Jaden Ivey. Yes, there's Asar Thompson, who I'm not sure he's going to be draftable in standard leagues this year either. Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duren, there are a million other shithouse centers, the Bagleys. And then Monte Morris. So do they start Morris, Ivy, and Cade together? That sounds stupid. Where the hell does Bojan Bogdanovic fit? So I can't fully criticize the Pistons because Bogdanovic might not remain. But it still is a weird... Oh, yeah. They've still got Killian Hayes too. And they traded up to pick Marcus Sasser, an undersized shooting point guard. So they've gone from, can we have every center in the world to, can we have 7 point guards now? That I don't really know what's going on. And this is aside from the Joe Harris trade. Like, I don't know where Harris fits in. Maybe he can shoot, clearly. But if you're expecting to flip Bojan Bogdanovic for a first and have Harris take his role, that's just not going to happen. Harris is nowhere near the level of player of Bogdanovic. And if you're running Joe Harris out there for 33 minutes a night, well, buddy, you're not going to even hit 17 games winning this season. So I don't know where he fits. The Pacers have traded Chris Duarte to the Kings for draft compensation that I don't know what it is. We haven't heard that announced yet. Duarte was a horrible pick at the time. Lottery pick as a 24-year-old. Stupid. He had a really hot start the first 10, 12 games of his career. Fell off and then was really bad last season with multiple ankle injuries. And basically he's just been salary dumped now. He's still got some hope to be a role player in Sacramento. But of course he's going to be behind Fox and Mitchell and Herter and Monk. They've got Colby Jones that they just drafted as well. There's Keegan Murray. They brought back the pencil, Harrison Barnes. Barnesy. So I don't really know where Duarte fits in there. Like, he's probably not an every night rotation player. So I don't know, but I don't know how to grade that for the Kings because I don't know what they gave up. Drew Eubanks. Now the Suns, I think, are probably the biggest winner of free agency so far. Getting the best player for the Rockets is good with Fred VanVleet. I still don't really know how it all fits together. And I'd like to see some follow-up moves, like drafting a man and signing another point guard is a little weird. But VanVleet undoubtedly makes them better. Maybe they win 29 games or 30 games. Still not going to be good. So I'm a little worried about that. But on the surface, as a vacuum signing, he's the best player and you got him. Whether it makes sense on your team, I would say it probably doesn't. But what the Suns did, getting just a really solid group of very good NBA role players. I heard someone tweeted at me, man, they've got a great bench for the G League. Bro, no. The guys they all signed are really, really good NBA bench players. And they did a great job doing it. Drew Eubanks, 2 years, $5 million with a player option. Eubanks is a legit sub-starting caliber NBA center. He's definitely a backup caliber center. He's probably better than Jock Landale. And I don't know if DeAndre Ayton's getting moved at any point, but Eubanks can start in a pinch. He's a very good rim protector. Very good signing. Taurean Prince goes to the Lakers, 1 year, $4.5 million. Weirdly waived by the Wolves. He's a guy that in theory should be a 3-and-D player who's not a very good defender and not a very good three-point shooter, but he's still a good player. He's still a good rotation player. Where his minutes go, like they lost Troy Brown, so they basically switched teams, Troy Brown and Taurean Prince. So I could imagine that Prince sort of slides into some of the Brown minutes, like an 18, 20-minute a night roll off the bench. Not really going to impact fantasy too much. Keita Bates-Diop goes to the Suns. 2 years, $5 million player option. Bates-Diop was pretty good last year for the Spurs. Took over when Jeremy Sohan was injured at the end of the season. In fact, I've got a sound drop for that. Fake. And was actually pretty good. Now, could he be a starter next to Durant, Beal, Booker, Ayton? Yes. Your competition is Torrey Craig. I think he's probably better than Torrey Craig. Second round pick, Tumani Kamara. Josh Okogie. I think Bates-Diop has got to be close to considered maybe a favorite to start. Maybe. He's an interesting player. And I think he would fit actually really nicely. He can defend. He can shoot a little bit. I think he'd fit really good in that starting lineup. He wouldn't be a great fantasy option because he's not going to touch the ball enough. But he has been a guy through his time at Ohio State and even with the Spurs that can generate some defensive stats. So that's something to watch. As I said, Troy Brown goes to the Wolves, 2 years, $8 million. He's basically like de-evolutioned Kyle Anderson, a wing who's really a point guard who can't shoot but can defend okay. He'll get some minutes there. It's not going to impact us much. I love the Bulls. Don't cut that out and use that in isolation. I love the Bulls signing Javon Carter. Javon Carter was a very good defensive point guard who worked himself into being a very good three-point shooter. He is a better player than Ayo Dosunmu, who might not be back. He is a better player than Goran Dragic, who they had last year. Is he a good fit next to Zach LaVine? Actually, a perfect fit next to Zach LaVine. But they've still got Kobe White, who they re-signed today, 3 years, $33 million, or $40 million if you believe Shams. They've still got Alex Caruso, who played, he's not really playing as a point guard. He played a lot at power forward and small forward last year. And they've still got all the other mediocrity on that team. But Carter at 3 years, 20 is a huge steal. And if he does win the starting point guard job, I wouldn't be surprised if he did. And they go Carter, Levine, DeRozan, Williams, Vooch. He would be, 29-minute night. Javon Carter is close to a 12-team league player. 1.7 steals, 2.5 threes, 10 points, 4 assists. It's close enough. It's one to watch. Now, I am big on Kobe White long term, but White and Levine together don't make a ton of sense. Trading Levine and having White and Carter makes a lot of sense if you're looking to rebuild and have guys that make sense together. Yeah, that would make sense. They won't do it, though. But Carter's a very good signing and a good player. Chimezie Metu, likely a minimum. I haven't seen the numbers on that. 1 year deal to the Suns. Just one of those guys, again, bouncy, power forward, backup center. Can play next to Durant, can play next to Ayton, working a little bit on his three-point shooting, good shot blocker. Might not play every night, but just another name to throw into the mix to rotate through players. Makes quite a bit of sense to me. Let's go to some more players in new teams. Big Georgie Nyang, the minivan. 3 years, $26 million to the Cavs. Nyang is a legit shooter. He legit can't do anything else, but he is a legit shooter. He also is very much a power forward. And the problem with that, to me, is that they have Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, and they desperately need someone to play the three. And they've been trying to shoehorn guys with some success with Lauri Markkanen 2 years ago and less success with Dean Wade last season or Lamar Stevens to play that three. Are they going to try it again with Nyang? Now, Nyang's spacing, shooting, low usage value actually makes a little bit of sense. He's not the defender that Isaac Okoro is. He's not the ball handler that Karis LeVert is. But that shooting off of Mobley, Allen, and Mitchell and Garland, I get it. I think he's probably more likely to be a mid-20s a night player, but it doesn't spell good things for Isaac Okoro, and I don't think Chetty Osman's going to be there long either. Jingle and Joe goes to the Magic, Joe Ingles. In fact, He doesn't just go to the Orlando Magic. He goes to our Orlando Magic. 2 years, $22 million. I would have to think that there is a team optional partial guarantee on that second season, but I don't know. Ingles came back remarkably early from ACL surgery last season and played pretty well. He's obviously slowed down a lot from where he was, but this roster again is bloody confusing. So, guards, Cole Anthony, Anthony Black,
Mr. Black,
Markel Fultz, Gary Harris, Jet Howard, Jalen Suggs. Still guards. Then at forwards, you got Paolo, you got Franz Wagner, you got Johnny Isaac, and now you throw Joe Ingles in there. Oh, and there's also Chuma KK around as well. And then at center, you've got Wendell Carter and maybe Mo Wagner. He hasn't been brought back yet. There's Bol Bol, who's not a center. Ingles will play a rotation role, I would guess, as a backup forward because he's better than a KK and you can't rely on Isaac. But it's not going to be a fantasy relevant one, but just another guy in there to add to the confusion of what their rotation's going to be. Yuta Watanabe goes to the Suns. 1 year, basically a minimum deal. Well, that is a minimum deal. He shot 44% from three last season, but 48% in the first half of the season. After the All-Star break, 29% from three. The 48, again, you know my mantra on this stuff. Relying on a bloke to do something that is completely bonkers outlier, like shoot 48% from three when he's next to Kevin Durant, if you're expecting that the next season, you're going to be let down in a huge way. He might be a 39% three-point shooter. He might be a 41% three-point shooter. But I'm not even going to come out here and tell you that he's a 44% guy like he was for the course of the season. Yes, he'll get a lot of open shots, but they won't necessarily go in. But another solid player for the Suns to add along with Bates Diop, along with bringing back a Kogi, along with Drew Eubanks, along with Chimezi Metu. Maybe Watanabe is a starter there next to Durant. He's quite a good player, Yuta. And it was disappointing to see him phase out of the rotation in Brooklyn towards the end of the season. He's not going to be much of a fantasy option, but he's there and he's very good depth. And then the big fella goes to Minnesota, Shake Milton. 2 years, $10 million team option. I can't complain too much about that. I think Shake, he's not going to start there. Mike Conley's there. Anthony Edwards is there. They brought back Nickeil Alexander-Walker as well. But he should be a rotation player, and Conley's not going to play every game. Milton's sort of more of a combo than a pure point. But he's a guy that, when given opportunities, can put up numbers. I think that's a really good value signing that a team like Denver maybe should have considered using their mid-level on bringing a guy like that in versus what they did. Let's look at the next group of players. Joshie Richardson goes to the Heat, 2 years, about $6 million player option. They lost Gabe Vincent, so getting a competent guard in. Their point guard situation is dire as shit. Now, maybe they trade for Damian Lillard. I don't know. They might have already done it. I'm too scared to look at Twitter while I'm recording this. Richardson, though, and they're under the expectation they're going to lose Max Strus as well. So Richardson's going to play 25 minutes a night behind Tyler Hero. He can handle the ball a little bit. He's going to have a sizable role. They still need to do something at point guard because A, you're not relying upon Kyle Lowry, and B, you can't rely upon Kyle Lowry. And he's not going to play 35 minutes a night anyway, even if you could. So they're going to need to do something. And Richardson can't run that position full-time at all. So we'll see what they end up doing. And obviously, the addition of Joshie Richardson, even though they lost Max Strus, probably limits some of the minutes for Jaime Jaquez out of the gate as a first-round pick. Richo is unlikely to be a 12-team fantasy guy. The Lakers bring in Cam Reddish, and I've never seen a more Lakers signing in my life. And I've never seen a player, and Mo Bumble was one of those actually, as a trade guy, that teams or fans, Lakers fans are going to tell me, man, just wait, watch till we develop it. I had the arguments already. Cam Reddish has been dreadful in 3 slots. In Atlanta, in New York, and in Portland. The Blazers said, man, we don't even want you to be a restricted free agent. We just don't want that. We don't even want those rights. See you later. He's just not good. I know we've got it in our head that he was his high-profile recruit coming out of high school, but he wasn't very good at Duke. He wasn't good in Atlanta. He wasn't good in New York, and he wasn't good in Portland. He's not going to play a big role in LA, of course. Now, maybe they don't bring back Lonnie Walker, who is another absolutely Lakers signing. Reddish is a guy that you think should shoot but can't. You think can be a good defender but isn't really. And should he be able to pass a little bit? Yeah, but he doesn't. So, yeah, I don't get it. But it's the most Lakers signing. And I love a lot of the things the Lakers do. Their draft work, their two-way work is amazing. Their undrafted free agent stuff is fantastic. The Gabe Vincent signing was brilliant. This one, even I know it's cheap, so it doesn't really matter, but I don't really know how he makes sense on this team. The Celtics bring in O'Shea Brissett, 2 years, $4.6 million. Brissett has had a couple of little flashes, but the big thing with him is he cannot shoot. He's a stretch big who had a 10-game sample of shooting 40% from three, but basically he's like a 30% or less three-point shooter. He's not a very good defender, even though he occasionally has some highlight plays. But the Celtics team, just as a backup big behind Porzingis, Horford, and Williams, assuming they're losing Grant Williams, he's fine. Good depth piece, nice number. Seth Curry goes back to Dallas. Now, okay, we talk about it. They brought back Kyrie. They've got Jaden Hardy there. They've still got Tim Hardaway. I don't really know how the minutes pan out, so someone's missing out between Seth and Tim and Jaden. I would hope we get a little bit more out of Jaden Hardy, but Seth Curry's just a very good shooter. Now, I fear that his ankle's rooted and it's never going to be good. That's my worry, but he's probably more of an 18 to 20 minute a night guy. But this is a guy that is a career 43% three-point shooter, struggles defensively, he's undersized, but just banging them in, man. Like, is he more value than Tim Hardaway? Yeah, probably. Although Hardaway still signed, 2 more years, I think? At 16 or 17, that's a bad contract. I'd love to get rid of Hardaway and have Hardy and Curry run the backup unit. I don't know that they'll necessarily do that, though. But he's going to get rotation minutes. The Grizzlies brought in Derrick Rose on a 2-year, $6.6 million contract. Sure, like why? I don't know. He barely played last season. His injuries have definitely caught up to him. They did 4 years ago. He won't start. Will he start when Jar is suspended? I don't know. I wouldn't think that you want to rely upon him to be your primary backup every night. Maybe he can. But he was quite poor last season, and that's why he got taken out of the rotation. Some might say that he's there to mentor Ja Morant. Or Rose has had his own sort of immaturity and off-court issues in the past. We'll see how that works out. It's not a huge expense. There are other guys I would have targeted instead of Derrick Rose, but we'll see. And then we had a trade where the Wizards just gave Monte Morris away. In fact, I know Monte Morris is the most boring man in the NBA, but is this a boring trade? Monte Morris traded to the Detroit Pistons for a future second-round pick. It's not that boring because a future second-round pick's nothing, really. They just got 2 for taking on Joe Harris. So you might think that I'm just a Troy Weaver hater or a Pistons hater. I just hate the moves they make. This is a good one. This is an unbelievably good move. I don't really know how it makes sense, but then I say it's an unbelievably good move. So why'd you give up picks to move up and draft a backup point guard in the draft last week? That doesn't make any sense at all, which is whatever. Morris is a very, very good backup point guard. So playing him behind Cade and Ivy with Asar, he's going to play 23 to 24 minutes a night, I would guess, Monte. His time of being a 12-team league player, and while it never really even peaked this year because he was shit, like it's not happening again. We saw that he's just not a guy that can ramp up into big volume or anything like that. It is just a solid, really good addition for the Pistons. Takes away from any hope, thank God, that Corey Joseph's going to come back. That's done, cooked, finished. It also absolutely roots Killian Hayes' value or where he sits. Now, Killian, I thought, took steps forward as a really good defender, but he's done. There's no way he's staying in Detroit. That's just not going to happen. That is a lot of players going to new places, which is probably more important than the next section, which is the guys who stayed in place. Draymond Green goes back to Golden State, 4 years, $100 million player option. Is it probably a little bit much? Maybe. Draymond was still literally at Defensive Player of the Year level play last year. He will be again. I think he'll play a little bit more center this season with Chris Paul in the lineup. Probably splitting half of his time there. Still going to be the same guy, I would guess, for fantasy. I can't believe Kyle Kuzma went back to Washington. I had no expectation that would happen. They are in such a weird spot. Bradley Beal have him for nothing. Porzingis, well, we don't really need much. Just give us something. Tyus Jones. Monte Morris, he's just taking up space. Take him away. Like, they're making weird moves all the time. So you think, they're clearing house. They don't like their guys. Kuz actually come back and be overpaid in an outsized role. But I guess the positive thing I'll say is when Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole are leading your offense, you're going to be the worst team in the NBA. You just are. Now, Kuzma's going to have a chance to really put up big numbers. Poole will still be the number one, but Kuzma's going to be 1A, 1B, however you want to phrase it. And he's never going to get defensive stats. He's probably never going to pass it. He's going to play power forward, which will increase his rebound numbers. That's strong. What is bad, though, is that now this means that we've got Tyus, we've got Jordan Poole, we've got Dan Gafford, we've got Kyle Kuzma. I reckon lock all four of those guys into starters at this point. Lock them all in. One starting spot. You got John Davis, LOL. You've got Corey Kispert. You've got first-round pick that you traded up for, Bilal Coulibaly, 18 years of age. Probably not going to start him. And you've got Denny Avdia. Now, I like it when Avdia plays at the 4 more than the 3. I like it when Avdia plays where he has the ball in his hands, which it could be the case. But they're going to want Kispert and Avdia and Coulibaly to play a little bit here. So someone said this to me a week or so ago when the Beal deal happened, man, this is huge for Avdia. Man, he's going to be such a good fantasy player. And I was like, I think we just need to wait because they didn't draft him. They're not invested in Avdia at all. And a lot of things can happen. I didn't think one of those things happening would be Kuzma coming back. But now he's in a 3-way, let's say even to be generous, a 2-way timeshare at small forward. Oh, this team also still has Danilo Gallinari and Landry Shamet as well, wherever the hell they fit in. That Avdia's, I don't think he's going to play enough. He might not start. He might play 20 minutes off the bench. Wes Unseld had no problem doing that last year. No problem at all playing him limited minutes. So unfortunately, especially for all my viewers in Israel, I don't think he's going to do a huge amount this year. I just don't think it's lined up for it. Sorry. Chris Middleton back to the Bucks. 3 years, $102 million. Discount. I worry about his knee significantly, another knee surgery. Definitely not touching him in the top 50 in fantasy drafts, but he comes back to his same role. He's good. He'll be better than last year. Cam Johnson, 4 years, $108 million. Good on Cam, coming in as a very old rookie. He made it work. He is an interesting sort of a player. He will get more minutes in Brooklyn than he had in the past. He will score. He will hit a lot of threes. He's not going to do huge amounts in other areas, but him and Bridges are locked in as your starting forwards, and he is going to be a very, very easy top 100 player. He might be a top 50 player. That is probably a little bit too much money for a team that I don't think is going to be good at all. And to have him as your highest paid player or second best player is a little rough, but good on him. Not a bad contract. Teams will want him still. Good teams will want him if you are looking to move off at any stage. Kyrie goes back to the Mavericks, 3 years, $126 million player option. I know that people will disagree and they love to hate on Kyrie, and I can hate on him as well, no problem. But him and his play was not the reason the Mavericks were bad at the end of last season. The idea of pairing him with Luka and trading away your defenders was what was bad. But that's not his fault. Kyrie didn't say, please give up all your defenders and bring me here. That's not what happened. He will still put up his numbers. But one thing that is important, and we'll do this when we look more through August at the Dallas Mavericks in depth, is that when Kyrie arrived, Luka's numbers dropped. His usage was about the same, but his assist numbers dropped down. And that's probably going to take Luka away from being that number 1 fantasy points pick, maybe to number 3 or 4, and probably back end of first round for category leagues, I think, with Kyrie there full season. Jakob Poeltl, 4 years, $80 million player option. He's 27. He's a very good center. He's probably a top 5 defensive center in the NBA. That's all good. But what is this team doing? You traded a first-round pick for him, and then you lost Fred VanVleet, and you're bringing in Dennis Schroeder. What does the new coach want to do? What's Darko going to do with Poeltl? Will he play him 33 minutes a night? Will Darko think that Precious Achiuwa is the answer? He better bloody not. Poeltl is going to be atrocious on free throws, but good on blocks, excellent on field goals, big rebounder, okay scorer. I just want 32 minutes out of him. This is a top 30 situation possibly for him. In a vacuum, it's a great contract for a very, very underrated player, but it makes 0 sense on this team. 0. Herb Jones, 4 years, $54 million. You might say that's an underpay for Herb Jones, but I know one thing about Herb Jones is that he does not care. This is a man who does not care about money in the slightest. He still does everything as if he hasn't made even any money in his career. I think he's from everything I've heard, he is the most low-key bloke going around the league. I don't know if he's going to start this season because they're going to have CJ and Ingram and allegedly Zion and Valanciunas, and then there's one spot between Trey Murphy and Herb Jones. And no, Jordan Hawkins is not going to be a part of that. Dyson Daniels still around too. So Herb is not a fantasy draftable player in my opinion. His value is extraordinarily tied to steals, some out of position blocks. That's it. And if he's playing 27 a night, he's not going to get enough of them. And I think that might be the problem. Very good value contract. Herb, it is definitely under what your value is, but he doesn't care and he wants to be in New Orleans. Good on him. Dracaris Levert. 2 years, $32 million. Yeah, look, are there other players that got less than that I would have paid $16 million to? Yeah. Levert actually did improve a little bit towards the end of last season. I still don't think he makes sense as a starter next to Mitchell and Garland. But are these insane rumors they're looking to trade Garland or open to trading Garland, which would be ridiculous? That in him next to Mitchell fits a little bit better in that sense without Garland there. It's just fine to bring him back at that price. Really not a lot to say about it. We're not drafting him in standard leagues. Kobe White goes back to Chicago. Shams reported at $40 million, Woj at $33. Sure, whatever. 3 years, $33, Kobe White. Thought he was pretty good last season, but with the addition of Javon Carter, with the fact that he's back on the Bulls, with the fact that at the moment Levine is still there, I don't really know how he's going to impact stuff this year. Josh Okogie's back on a minimum in Phoenix, just joins in all of those guys, Yuta and Cater and Metu and all these guys competing for minutes. He's not going to be a fantasy guy. Trey Lyles back 2 years, $16 million to be the Kings' backup center. Play some backup 4 as well behind Harrison Barnes. Yeah, like he had a few moments. Some of his stuff I think was a little bit overrated at times last season, Trey Lyles, but he sort of fit in nicely as a backup big. He also put it in like a 10-game stretch where his block rate was out of his ass and then it fell back to earth. Solid backup, that's fine. DeAndre Jordan back in Denver, and no, that's not the bad move that Denver made. I don't know that you should have prioritized bringing back him to be literally a locker room presence. That's it. He's not a good player, not a good on-court guy. I get it. But I don't also. For a basketball perspective, it's shithouse. It makes no sense. On-court stuff, yeah, fine. The Suns also brought back Damo Lee, who was an elite three-point shooter last season. Probably a minimum contract, got a player option 2 years. He'll be part of the rotation, taking up some of the minutes that Landry Shamet has given up with him leaving. Of course, he's not going to play enough, though, with Beal and Booker both there. Jerami Grant, I don't know why I didn't put this with some of the other earlier re-signings, but far out. 5 years, $160 million. Now, my initial intel on Grant was that this deal was already, he was locked and loaded and going to re-sign. I said that about 3-4 months ago, but not at this amount. That's not what I heard. I heard like 420. That's insane. Jerami Grant is solid. If you are a championship contender and he is your third or fourth best player and you're just going all in, I get it. But you're not. Is this a move to appease Dame? Really? 5 years, 100. Jerami Grant shot the ball really well last season. His defensive play has dropped off somewhat. I don't know. Is Jerami Grant, let me ask you this question. I don't know the answer. I don't know how I feel about it. Is Jerami Grant a better player than Aaron Gordon? What has Jerami Grant done as this reinvented offensive player through his time on a putrid Pistons team? And honestly, putrid Blazers team that is any better than what Aaron Gordon did as a player on a putrid Magic team. I don't know. I don't think it's that far off. That is insane money. Insane. And if it is to keep Dame around, well, get fired. Seriously. Dame is great. He's a great Blazers legend. But if Dame is requiring you to do this, I'm sorry. I'd see you later, mate. I'm shipping you to OKC or something. This is franchise killing potentially. That's horrible. Maybe I'm just overreacting in the moment, but bloody hell, he's not that good. Nor is Reggie Jackson, and by not that good, I say he's shithouse. But he goes back on the mid-level, part of the mid-level exception to the Nuggets at 2 years, $10.25 million. He wasn't in the rotation in the playoffs. Played 2 minutes a night across 5 games. Yes, they do need someone to handle some backup role with Bruce Brown gone. But Shake Milton was there 2 years, $10 million. Could have signed him. Maybe have a crack at Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who was an unrestricted free agent. Much better defender than Reggie. I don't know why your moves are bringing back Reggie Jackson and DeAndre Jordan while losing Bruce Brown and getting markedly worse as a defending champion. Pair that with some questionable draft picks. I've hated this Nuggets offseason so far. Hated it. Bringing Jackson in for the mid-level sucks. DeAndre Jordan, yeah, what's the point? Losing Brown and then trading up for Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson. Ugh, I don't like it. They've still got the best player in the world, so they're going to be all right. But the moves on the margins, they can matter. And the moves on the margins last year, Bruce Brown, is what won them the title. These ones aren't going to do that. I dropped the sound drop already, but I'll say it again. Harrison Barnes is back with the Kings, 3 years, $54 million. I need to see exactly what happens with the Kings before I judge this, but them trading away pick 24, as well as Rashawn Holmes, to open up cap space so they could sign someone they could have signed anyway, is very weird. Now, maybe they got word that Kyle Kuzma wasn't going to come and Draymond wasn't going to come, but this is exactly what happened when they gave those picks to the Sixers all those years ago when Vlade was running things. Not the same because it's not as impactful, but you're clearing cap space and you're giving up assets to do it for things that aren't happening. Maybe I am wrong on this, but so far all they've done is brought back Harrison Barnes and brought back Trey Lyles. Not true. They brought in Chris Duarte, but gave up a draft pick to do it. I don't know what draft pick. And then gave up pick 24, Omax Prosper, who, honestly, could have been an interesting part of this team. And you still had bird rights to bring back Trey Lyles and Harrison Barnes. You could have done all of that stuff. Now, maybe you couldn't have brought back Chris Duarte, but I think you still could have. And used exceptions for Sasha Vezenkov, I'm not sure. So that's why I need to see it all play out. And bringing Barnes back at this price, his cap hold was about $27 million. So signing him for $16 million this year, it actually reduced his cap hold quite a bit. But if you did have, and you cleared all that cap space because you thought someone big was coming in, you could have just renounced Barnes to have $35 million in cap space. And that doesn't look like, so far I'm a little bit down on what the Kings have done by giving up a draft pick to re-sign your own guys. Seems like pretty bad process, but I am going to give it a little bit of time to see what else they do because stuff could still come good of that. Trey Jones is back in San Antonio, 2 years, $20 million. That's backup point guard money. That's not much at all. I'd expect that he starts, but that means one of Sohan, Vassell, Keldon, or Zach Collins is going to come off the bench. I don't think they're going to start Jerami Sohan as a point guard. I think Trey Jones is going to start there, and that leaves a roster crunch, a 6-5 situation. So someone is going to miss out there. Not sure who it is. Good value for Trey. Good value for Nickeil Alexander-Walker as well, 2 years, $9 million. Turned into a pretty good defensive player. He's got size. The shooting's really bad. He's not someone you want to start at all. Maybe he's a rotation player in Minnesota. The Lakers signed Rui Hachimura, 3 years, $51 million. Sure. Rui is not worth that at all. Rui had a couple of good shooting nights, but he's still the same bloke who needs usage, doesn't defend, doesn't pass. He's an up and down shooter. I've got no problem with it. He's could have been a key bench rotation piece for them. The fact that he gets $17 million and Gabe Vincent's on 11 is pretty crazy to me. I think Rui's value was gassed up a lot by highlight clips and highlight social media through the playoffs. I just don't think he's worth that contract. It's not terrible. It's not killing what they need to do. No problem with them doing it. Just in terms of a pure value play or just a value contract for the guy, I don't think it works. Whatever. The Spurs bring back Julian Champagnie. 4 years, $12 million. 4 years for Julian Champagnie. Now, he did play well down the stretch last year. Team option at the end. I would guess there's maybe some non-guarantees somewhere there. I don't know. Champagnie's like a small forward shooting guard type of player who's going to have to battle with CD Sissoko and Blake Wesley and Malachi Branham in that bench grouping. He played all right, deserves a contract. We'll see what happens. And Kevin Love is the last one on my list here. He goes back to the Miami Heat, 2 years, $7.6 million with a player option. He'll probably play 20 minutes a night again. I guess he'd play behind Caleb Barton, but a lot of things still to happen there with Miami. Obviously, we're not caring too much about Kevin Love for fantasy, and that will wrap it up for the end of the first day of free agency. Do I risk going and looking at Twitter and seeing if everything has burnt down since then? No, only one small thing. I might as well talk about it now. Victor Oladipo traded to Oklahoma City. All right, cool. And the Thunder are getting a draft pick there. Gives a trade exception for Miami. Oladipo's injured. He's not going to play. That doesn't mean anything. So we escaped. We got out of it. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening. Oh, no, did I tell you? Follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on Odyssey. If you're on YouTube, you thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.